Welcome, deep divers, to another journey into the fascinating stories hidden all around us. Take a moment right now, wherever you are, and just look around your home. The walls, the layout, the very idea of separate rooms, how much of it do we just take for granted? We walk through our houses every single day, often without a second thought about why they look and feel the way they do. Today, we're embarking on a truly historical deep dive, one that will uncover the hidden story behind the English house. But this isn't just about bricks and mortar, it's like a living, breathing record of changing societies, evolving technologies, and our shifting ideas of comfort and privacy. We're going to see how the humble home, from its simplest beginnings as a basic shelter to, well, the more complex structures of the Victorian era, mirrors the human story in the most intimate way. Our mission for this deep dive, it's simple, really. We want to shortcut your understanding of this architectural evolution. We're hoping to give you those aha moments about the deep cultural logic embedded in the very fabric of our homes.
And to guide us on this intricate journey, we've pulled together insights from a truly rich stack of sources. Really fascinating stuff. We'll be drawing from foundational texts on architectural history, like the writings of, say, Vitruvius, detailing ancient building practices and the development of early structures. That really sets the stage for everything that followed. We'll also delve into specific studies of English building patterns, exploring how the natural landscape and local geology dictated early construction choices. It literally shaped the character of regions. And crucially, we'll explore social histories, including some really key work like that of Sidney Oldall Addy, which reveal how our understanding of comfort, privacy, and space has transformed over centuries. We're talking about the move from, communal living in medieval great halls to the highly specialized rooms of later periods. Think of these sources as a kind of archaeological record, but instead of digging through the ground, we're digging through layers of architectural thought and social change that ultimately shape the place you call home.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Seriously, have you ever stopped to think about why your house looks the way it does? Why are rooms arranged in a particular order? Why do we even have a hallway? Which, as we'll see, was once a pretty radical innovation, actually. It fundamentally reordered domestic life. We're about to explore that profound why and discover the surprisingly long and detailed story behind the slow, incremental development of the English home. So if we're going back to the very beginning, really basic, before we had houses as we know them, what did people build and what drove those first choices? Our journey naturally starts with the most fundamental human need, right? Shelter. Pure and simple.
Absolutely. If we look back to the very earliest forms of dwelling, ancient writers like Vitruvius provide invaluable descriptions. He notes quite simply how houses originated from basic, pragmatic shelters. They were constructed from whatever materials were most readily available in the immediate environment. This wasn't about aesthetic choice, not at all. It was pure necessity and resourcefulness, facing the elements. To give you a vivid example of this kind of adaptive ingenuity, Vitruvius describes the Colchians in Pontus. Now, in areas with lots of forests, they'd build their homes by laying entire trees flat on the ground. That created a rectangular space. Then they'd build up walls by stacking more timbers, crossing them at the angles, creating these robust, high structures. The inevitable gaps, they were filled with chips and mud, and the roofs were formed into a sort of pyramid shape with leaves and more mud. What this account really reveals is a direct and honestly ingenious reliance on immediate natural resources. It's a basic, highly pragmatic approach to creating protection. This wasn't about grand design, it was survival, taking what the earth offered and making it into a home. And these ancient principles, adapting to local resources, well, they would eventually underpin the entire development of English building.
It's fascinating then how the immediate environment, the forests, the fields, the very ground beneath their feet was, in essence, the first architect, dictating not just the materials, but maybe even the initial form of the earliest shelters.
Precisely. Local geology and the available flora were absolutely paramount. You couldn't just order materials from afar. Vitruvius even distinguishes between different types of stones, particularly those used for making lime, which was crucial for mortar. He advises that stones from shady, moist pits are better than those from dry ones, and that white stones are superior to brown ones because they're easier to work. He also highlights that pebbles found in rivers and streams are excellent for lime. They produce very white, neat work, which was chiefly used in rough casting walls. This just emphasizes how deeply the earliest construction practices were tied to the immediate physical environment. Every material choice was a direct, informed response to what nature provided for durability and strength.
Right, that ancient resourcefulness, as Vitruvius described it, gives us a great starting point. Now let's take that lens and apply it specifically to the British Isles, because there, Geology didn't just provide materials, did it? It seems like it deeply imprinted itself on the very DNA of English building styles.
That's where the story truly comes alive for England, definitely. And sources like the Pattern of English Building offer a really vivid picture here. English building stones, particularly its abundant limestones and sandstones, played an absolutely crucial role in shaping regional architectural styles. You can almost map the geology by looking at the houses. Take the Cotswolds, for instance. Everyone knows those picturesque cottages. Well, their roofs were traditionally made from oolite slates. Now, these aren't the lightweight slates we might think of today. They're significantly heavier than modern slates, much thicker. This characteristic had a direct, practical implication. They required a very steep pitch, typically ranging from 45 to 65 degrees.
Wow, that's steep.
Yeah, really steep. It was necessary to effectively shed rain and snow without the roof collapsing under its own weight or letting moisture seep in. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice or some charming regional feature. It was a practical necessity dictated by the material's weight, how it split, and the local climate. It had to work. So those distinctive steep-roofed cottages, a direct result of the local geology. And we can dive into some specific examples of how different stones dictated construction and regional character. It gets quite detailed. For many stones, especially the harder varieties, they could only really be used as rubble. That just means irregularly shaped pieces. This rubble would be laid either randomly, without any specific pattern, or it would be brought to courses. That means leveled up to form distinct horizontal layers, maybe every 12 to 18 inches. Give it a bit more order. If the stones were roughly squared, they could be laid in what was called regular coursed patterns, with courses maybe 2 to 9 inches high. But regardless of the method, rubble construction was almost always the most economical way of building, cheapest and quickest.
So it was everywhere, basically.
Pretty much. It made it widespread across much of England and lent that rugged, honest texture to countless early homes. It was the fastest, most accessible way to build a sturdy wall using whatever local stone you could dig up. Now, when it comes to specific types of oolite, these limestones, we see regional preferences and even trade patterns emerge. It tells you about local geology and transport developing. Keaton building stone, for example, highly valued for its great weathering properties. Apparently, something like 90% of all Keaton stone quarried predominantly found its way to Cambridge.
90% to Cambridge.
Yeah, it really shaped the look of many of its colleges for centuries. Further north, Clipsham and Ancaster oolite from the Rutland-Lincolnshire border were widely used. Many Lincolnshire churches were built from Ancaster oolite, and it traveled significantly too, notably to Norwich. It's said to have been used in all the principal churches there, like St. Peter Mancroft, back in the 15th century. It even made its way into Nottinghamshire for churches and castles. Shows how a superior, durable stone could travel surprisingly far, even in medieval times, if the project was important enough. Then you have the sandstone slates. These were particularly prevalent in the west and north of England, formed from much older rocks. While some of these split quite easily, they consistently produced roofs that were thicker, heavier, and darker than their limestone counterparts. Medieval Bristol, for instance, was largely roofed with slabs of Pennant sandstone. These could be as much as an inch thick.
An inch thick? That's incredibly heavy.
Yeah, exactly. Made for these incredibly heavy, distinctive dark roofs that still characterize the city's older buildings today. So you get these utterly different architectural expressions across the country, just based on the local rock. And, beyond pure practicality, some unique stones even found decorative uses as wealth and transport improved later on. Mona marble, which is actually a serpentine from Anglesey, was used domestically on a truly vast scale. You see it in Penrhyn Castle in Wales, built in the early 19th century. This really highlights a shift towards aesthetic considerations, where resources and the means to transport them allowed. Showcase the increasing sophistication of English building styles and the desire to imbue homes with status and beauty, not just function.
So it's crystal clear the material wasn't just what they built with, but fundamentally how they built. It influenced everything, from the practical pitch of a roof to the very texture of the walls, the overall character of a regional building style. It's a fundamental lesson, isn't it? How environment shapes human endeavor, carving a unique identity into the very landscape of England. That brings us to a really fascinating question about the inside of these homes. Once the basic shell was up, shaped by local materials, when did a house stop being just a shelter, just a collection of local stuff put together? When did it start becoming a place of comfort, a space designed for how people actually felt within its walls? It feels like such a modern idea, doesn't it?
It certainly does feel modern, but it represents a subtle yet really profound shift in cultural values that took centuries to unfold. Home. A short history of an idea sheds crucial light on this. It observes that before, say, the 18th century, the concept of comfort, as we understand it, simply wasn't the main way people judged furniture or an interior space. Think about a medieval great hall, the main communal space. Seating would have been hard benches, maybe stools, perhaps a high-backed chair for the lord, but that was more about status than, ease. A chair, for example, might have been called good if it looked beautiful or grand or impressive, or if it symbolized social status and power. Whether it was pleasant or ergonomically sound to sit in for hours, that wasn't really the point.
So, function, durability, showing off your status.
Exactly. Those are the primary goals: utility, durability, and display. So what changed? Well, this analysis reveals that our modern expectations for interiors and furniture, where we instinctively prioritize comfort, are actually a relatively recent development. The key insight here is that comfort isn't some inherent human need that's always expressed in design. It's a culturally constructed ideal. The 18th century marked a profound shift. Homes went from being designed primarily for outward display and status to being increasingly centered on the individual's inner experience and physical ease.
Okay. So it became more about the person living there.
Precisely. This reprioritization dramatically reshaped interior design and set the stage for our modern domestic expectations. The rising middle class played a huge role. Their desire for domesticity, a more intimate family life, combined with new manufacturing techniques for softer furnishings. Things like upholstered chairs, curtains to block drafts, carpets to warm floors, these became symbols of this new, gentler approach to living. It wasn't just about softness. It was about creating a more private, pleasant, and controlled environment within the home itself.
So, our very idea of a livable space actually underwent its own evolution, just like the houses themselves. It wasn't some fixed truth, but a developing concept shaped by culture and individual aspirations. It profoundly altered our relationship with our personal space.
Exactly. The design of the walls, the arrangement of furniture, the very dimensions and layout of rooms implicitly tell a story. They show what society at any given time valued in daily life. From the hard practicality of the medieval era to the, plush sensibilities of the Georgian period, architecture becomes this tangible record of human values and desires for self and family.
Okay, so if early homes were much simpler, often just these large communal spaces, how did we get to the idea of a house with many distinct rooms, each serving a highly specialized purpose? It's such a dramatic shift, isn't it? From one large hall to a complex layout. It must say a lot about how social life was changing.
It's one of the most profound transformations in the history of the English house, absolutely. And it's where we move decisively away from that medieval model. Sidney Oldall Addy, whose work really details the English medieval house, paints a picture of a world where the great hall was the heart and often the entirety of domestic life. In these early homes, everyone, lord, lady, family, servants, even guests, they all ate, slept, and conducted business in this single, large, multi-purpose room.
All together, wow.
All together. Privacy, as we understand it, it simply didn't exist. Beds might be curtained off for a bit of visual separation, but sounds, smells, activity, everything was shared. The initial shift away from this communal model began gradually. The lord and lady started seeking a measure of seclusion. This led to the addition of a solar or chamber, usually a private upper room, where the lord and lady could retreat, a first step. But true specialization, particularly in grander homes, gained significant momentum with the influence of architects like Andrea Palladio. His systematic designs profoundly influenced European and therefore English architecture from the 17th century onwards.
Palladio, right. Heard of him.
His meticulous plans introduced distinct spatial concepts. He described halls with 4 columns, called tetrastelae, often square, designed for aesthetic proportion and structural security, sure, but also serving as formal receiving areas. He also detailed Corinthian halls, with columns rising directly from the ground or on pedestals. These weren't just decoration. They were early, sophisticated examples of deliberately segmenting space for specific social functions, fundamentally moving away from single, multi-purpose halls. This Palladian ideal of specific rooms for specific functions, a formal dining room for meals, a drawing room for entertaining, maybe a salon for conversation, was enthusiastically adopted in English country houses. Think Inigo Jones, Christopher Wren. This meant a shift from everyone gathering in one large hall to a series of functionally distinct rooms. And this brings us to another revolutionary innovation that made this specialization possible: the rise of the hallway.
A hallway. It seems so obvious now.
Exactly. It's so ubiquitous we hardly notice it. But it was a radical concept. In medieval houses, rooms just opened directly into one another. You had to pass through private spaces to get to others. Imagine walking through someone's bedroom to get downstairs.
Yeah, not very private.
Not at all. The hallway provided a dedicated circulation spine, a passage running between rooms, giving access to each one independently. This seemingly simple change had enormous implications. It allowed for genuine privacy for individual rooms, especially bedrooms. It also separated the movement of family members from that of servants, who could use back stairs or passages to reach service areas without intruding on the family space. This hierarchical organization of space was crucial for the emerging social structures of the Georgian and Victorian eras. Palladio's plans, actually, with their careful consideration of circulation and light, he even notes designs where stairs have no wall in the middle and get light from above, were precursors to this more sophisticated internal flow. And his descriptions of specialized rooms like closets and mansardi small rooms above others further highlight this move away from multipurpose communal areas towards specific private functions.
That's a really powerful observation. Even if the word privacy isn't explicitly used in those architectural texts in our modern sense, the very design, the layout of the building, especially adding the hallway, it demonstrates a growing desire for distinct spaces. Spaces for different activities, different modes of living. The architecture itself speaks volumes about social changes and the arriving concept of the domestic sphere. Speaking of major shifts, what about a truly fundamental technological leap within the home? Something that really changed everything. I'm thinking about something so commonplace now we barely register it, but which must have been utterly revolutionary. Something that allowed homes to literally grow upwards.
You're touching on something absolutely foundational, the contained fire, channeled through a chimney. Its widespread adoption fundamentally reshaped the English house. Though it's true, its precise historical invention isn't always explicitly detailed in every source. But the sources certainly reveal its pervasive presence and undeniable importance in later construction. That implicitly points to a long history of development and its pivotal role in enabling vertical expansion. Think back to that medieval Great Hall again. The fire typically burned in an open hearth right in the center of the room. Smoky a bit. Incredibly inefficient, smoky, and it really limited how you could use the space. Imagine trying to have multiple floors above an open fire like that. The smoke would just fill the upper chambers, making them completely unlivable. The development of the chimney with its enclosed flue was the game changer. It allowed the fire to be placed against an external wall and its smoke safely vented upwards out through the roof. Early chimneys might have been simple hooded hearths, but over centuries they evolved into the robust masonry structures we recognize. Now, this wasn't just about comfort, though it definitely improved that. It was a structural revolution. By containing the fire and its smoke, the chimney unlocked the ability to safely build livable upper stories.
Right, because the smoke was gone.
Exactly. No longer were upper floors just smoke-filled attics or storage spaces. They could become dedicated bedrooms, private studies, additional receiving rooms. This directly facilitated the specialization of space we just discussed. Bedrooms could move upstairs, offering unprecedented levels of privacy. Meanwhile, the ground floor could be freed up for distinct kitchens, dining rooms, parlors. The chimney even allowed for individual heating in different rooms eventually, leading to a much more comfortable and stratified domestic environment. That's a key feature of, say, the Victorian house. Consider, for example, modern building codes. Sources like Building Codes Illustrated discuss fire-resistive construction. They specify the necessity of fire blocking, a crucial safety measure. It's required at ceiling and floor openings around pipes, ducts, and notably chimneys.
Fire blocking.
This building code requirement isn't just a detail. It means that chimneys are designed to safely pass through multiple floor levels. That's a clear and direct indication of multi-story construction being standard practice. The fire blocking itself is critical to prevent the uncontrolled spread of smoke and fire between these levels. It directly addresses the significant safety concerns associated with containing fire within the structure of a multi-story building. Without the ability to safely contain and vent fire, developing livable upper stories would have been far more hazardous and, consequently, much slower to evolve. Even in contemporary guides, like one for builders in hot, dry climates, there's a brief mention of practical issues, like fireplaces backdrafting into common areas, smoke coming back into the room. This seemingly minor detail just underscores that even with established chimney systems, managing fire within a building is complex. It presents ongoing challenges, reflecting centuries of practical experience and refinement in domestic fire management. So, while the sources don't give us a specific date for the invention of the chimney, the requirement for fire-resistant construction around them, as seen in building codes, reflects centuries of lessons learned. This innovation, safely channeling smoke, containing fire, was absolutely essential for developing livable upper stories. It marked a profound departure from those earlier, more primitive open hearths in single-story halls, and it paved the way for the multi-story English homes we know today.
What an incredible thought! That a contained fire didn't just warm a room, but literally propelled houses upwards. It transformed our entire concept of domestic space. It fundamentally altered what a house could be and how people could inhabit it across multiple levels, opening up totally new possibilities for comfort and privacy. Our homes aren't static entities, are they? They seem to be constantly adapting, morphing, evolving to reflect how we live, how society changes, even our relationship with technology. It's almost like they're living organisms themselves.
That's absolutely true. And how buildings learn provides fantastic insights into exactly this phenomenon. It shows how elements of the home change over time, often driven by social, technological, and environmental factors in a continuous, often incremental evolution. These changes aren't just architectural whims, they're direct responses to the shifting tides of daily life. Let's take the humble porch, for example, a clear illustration of this process. The evolution of the porch is a truly telling story, actually. Initially, open porches were a common feature, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries. They served as a kind of transitional space, didn't they? A semi-public zone where neighbors could chat, kids could play under supervision, families could relax in the evening watching the street. It was a space for community interaction.
Right, very sociable.
Very. Then, as climate and new challenges arose, came the addition of screens, primarily to keep out bugs and pests, making the space more usable in warmer months. Simple adaptation. Following that, glass enclosures were introduced, storm windows basically, to ward off the chill. That extended the seasonal usability of the space into the colder seasons. And eventually, these areas evolved into fully insulated walls, often becoming integral parts of the main living space, basically a sunroom or an extension of the living room. Each stage proposed the next, the text notes, driven inexorably by climate. What was once an open-air feature gradually got absorbed into the house interior, reflecting a growing desire for enclosed, controlled environments. But this shift also reflects deeper changes in the social climate. Streets became noisier with cars and trucks, and inside the home, air conditioning and television beckoned people indoors.
Making the porch less appealing.
Exactly. It made the traditional open porch functionally obsolete by the 1960s for many people. And in its place, often facing the backyard, came the deck. A more private, less social outdoor extension, reflecting a cultural move towards more secluded family leisure. The garage also underwent a huge transformation, reflecting shifting priorities and technologies, particularly the rise of car culture. Originally, early 20th century, garages were typically small utilitarian structures hidden behind the house in the backyard, almost an afterthought for the single-family car. However, they gradually migrated to dominate the front facade, didn't they? Swallowing nearly half the front of suburban ranch houses and their descendants.
You see that everywhere now.
Everywhere. By 1960, garages had ballooned to occupy about 45% of a home's enclosed space. That's up from a mere 15% in 1930. Huge change. Now, this wasn't solely due to multi-car families, though that was part of it. The text suggests it also served as a kind of covert correction of another modernist mistake. See, modernist architects often viewed the car as an eyesore and tried to hide it, but the reality of suburban life demanded easy, direct access. The garage then became a pragmatic necessity. It asserted its dominance on the home's public-facing presence and internal spatial hierarchy, prioritizing convenience and the car's central role in daily life.
So, the very layout of a home, even something as seemingly mundane as where you choose to park your car or where you sit outdoors, it tells a profound story. A story about how we interact with our environment, our technology, and each other. It's like a living snapshot of our evolving lifestyles and priorities. This makes me wonder, though, is there something inherently different, maybe even, superior, about the adaptability of older homes compared to more modern, purpose-built structures? It feels like some buildings just learn better than others, They seem more flexible.
That's a deeply insightful question, and how buildings learn argues quite compellingly that, yes, old buildings are more freeing. The core idea here is that grand final solution buildings, those often overspecified, meticulously designed, highly engineered for a single specific purpose, can become obsolete quite quickly, and often they just need to be torn down, because their rigid design makes them incredibly difficult and expensive to adapt to new needs or changing societal uses. They are, in a sense, too perfect for a single moment in time. They can't bend easily with the winds of change. In stark contrast, think about temporary buildings. Those often thrown up quickly and roughly, maybe even seen as disposable. They frequently end up housing projects that flourish precisely because of the low supervision, adaptable environment they offer. These temporary structures, surprisingly, can become permanent and immensely valuable because of their inherent disposability and malleability. They aren't precious, they're workable. This allows for what the text calls small microenvironments, each of which is different and each a creative space. People feel their space is truly theirs. They're free to nail things to a door, bore a hole in the floor, or, injure the architectural or artistic value without worrying too much.
Right. Less pressure.
Exactly. This freedom fosters creativity and allows the building to put on the personality of the people in it, making it incredibly resilient over time. Many of England's cherished old cottages and townhouses, for instance, have survived centuries, precisely because they've been continually adapted, altered, and repurposed by generations of inhabitants. They've learned. This concept is further illuminated by the idea of gradual money. The text argues that building economics should fundamentally reflect and serve long-term value, moving beyond just the immediate moment of sale to consider decades of use. Jane Jacobs draws a critical distinction here. She talks about cataclysmic money, which she sees as destructive in cities, often applied in large, one-off, inflexible urban renewal projects that just wipe away existing fabric. And she contrasts that with gradual money, which she sees as wholesome and adaptive. It flows steadily into maintenance and adaptation. The crucial insight is that maintaining a steady flow of money into a building for ongoing upkeep and changes is vital. This consistent, often smaller-scale investment keeps the building relevant and prevents it from falling into disrepair. Once a building starts to head downhill due to neglect, the motivation to fix it is often lost, right, leading eventually to demolition. This steady, gradual investment allows a building to continuously evolve and remain relevant. It tells its story through continuous modifications rather than grand, singular statements.
That really suggests that the evolution of a house isn't just about its initial design or construction. It's about its ongoing capacity to learn and change with its inhabitants, to absorb their needs and narratives over generations. It's like a living entity, not a static monument. Its true value lies in that continuous dialogue with those who call it home. It truly sounds like our homes are so much more than just simple shelters. They're almost like physical manifestations of our collective history, our values, our very identity as a society. They tell a story without uttering a single word.
Absolutely. And A History of Architecture puts this perspective very eloquently. It states, all buildings, the standard and the fancy, are worthy of study, and that buildings are only the visible tip of a complicated story that encompasses politics and economics, the philosophy of human institutions, and the identity that people of all social levels find in the built environment they inhabit. It's a profound statement, isn't it? It encourages us to look beyond mere aesthetics or superficial appearance, and to delve into the rich tapestry of human experience that is quite literally built into our surroundings. So this analysis means that the walls, the windows, the doors, all the elements we often take for granted, are deeply imbued with cultural logic. They reflect power structures, class distinctions, technological advancements, even our collective aspirations. For example, that increasing specialization of rooms we talked about, the eventual emergence of hallways and separate entries. That wasn't just architectural whimsy. It reflected a profound societal shift towards greater personal privacy. It showed a growing distinction between family and servant spaces, a desire to control movement and interaction within the home.
The house becomes a map of society almost.
In a way, yes. The very act of creating a distinct drawing room for receiving guests or dining room for formal meals, as became prevalent in the Georgian and Victorian eras, speaks directly to changing social rituals, evolving etiquette, and distinct class structures. These spaces became stages for social performance, a physical manifestation of an increasingly complex and stratified society. The journey from that single communal medieval hall, as Addie describes, to a Victorian house with its strict delineation of public and private, upstairs and downstairs, front of house and back of house. It's a clear architectural record of these profound cultural changes.
So when we look at a house, we're not just seeing wood and stone. We're seeing a condensed history lesson, a physical timeline of human progress and societal change, embedded right there in our everyday surroundings. It's an incredibly rich narrative just waiting to be uncovered.
Precisely. This provides a rich and essential context for understanding the origins of modern residential design and how our living spaces came to be what they are today. The slow, incremental development of the place we call home is this ongoing, dynamic dialogue between fundamental human needs and ingenuity. It's a dialogue that is constantly constrained and shaped by the environment, available materials, and evolving social expectations. It's a continuous process of adaptation and expression, where every brick and beam has a story to tell about the people who built it and lived within its walls. Hashtag Shag 4.2 materials, structures, and the human element.
Beyond these grand ideas about architecture as a societal mirror, what about the very act of building itself? The choices of the materials, the practical considerations that literally hold a house together. How do those fundamental elements contribute to this evolving story?
Oh, absolutely. The choice and treatment of building materials also carry immense historical weight. They reflect societal shifts and technological limitations just as much as the layout does. For instance, in England, thatch was a common roofing material for centuries. It's a testament to its availability and effectiveness, especially for rural cottages. Historically, rye straw was widely considered the strongest option. It had an impressive lifespan, maybe 30 years if well maintained. It was the favored material for many half-timbered cottages, particularly in areas like West and South Lancashire, contributing to that distinctive rustic charm.
You can picture it perfectly.
Exactly. Wheat straw was also extensively used, offered a similar lifespan if both the workmanship and the straw quality were high. However, a significant change occurred with modern agriculture in the 20th century. The shift from traditional hand-threshed haulm, which was ideal for thatching because the stalks weren't bruised, to combine-harvested straw. The combine harvester crushes and damages the straw, rendering it largely useless for traditional thatching.
So mechanization changed the roofs.
In a way, yes. This seemingly minor detail about roofing material reflects broader agricultural and industrial changes impacting traditional building methods, and, in turn, slowly altering the visual landscape of rural England as other roofing materials became more prevalent or necessary. And then, of course, there are the fundamental structural considerations, the immutable laws of physics that builders have always had to contend with. Structures, or why things don't fall down, reminds us of the intrinsic stiffness of various materials. Substances like wood, bone, stone, most metals, they're considerably stiffer than, say, rubber or flesh. This fundamental property dictates how they can be used and what forms they can take. In masonry, for example, columns are made progressively fatter to increase their compressive strength. You see this principle beautifully demonstrated in the sturdy, heavy columns of ancient Doric temples or the thick walls of medieval castles. They had to be strong. English builders, grappling with heavy stone or the expansive spans needed for timber framing in roofs and floors, continuously experimented and refined their understanding of these material properties. From the thickness of a wall needed to resist outward thrust, to the careful jointing of a timber frame, every structural decision was a direct response to these physical laws. This basic understanding of how materials behave under stress has underpinned all architectural evolution, from the earliest shelters to the most complex modern buildings. It demonstrates the pragmatic ingenuity of generations of builders.
It's truly incredible how every nail, every beam, every choice in material, and every structural decision contributes to this deep, rich, and continuously evolving story of the home. It's like a tapestry woven from necessity, ingenuity, and cultural aspiration, where physics and social dynamics intertwine to create the spaces we inhabit. Hashtag outro. What an incredible journey we've taken today, tracing the evolution of the English house. We've really covered some ground. We've traveled from the earliest, most basic shelters, dictated entirely by immediate local resources, right through to the refined, specialized interiors that mirror our complex social structures, from the medieval Great Hall to the multi-room Victorian dwelling. We've seen how the very definition of comfort transformed over centuries, how the simple contained fire of the chimney enabled houses to reach for the sky, literally, and how our homes continue to adapt and tell stories about our changing lives, from the humble porch evolving and disappearing to the ever-present garage taking center stage. Every element, from the stones in the ground to the social dynamics influencing floor plans, the invention of the hallway, it all holds a piece of our collective story.
What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that our homes are not static objects at all. They are dynamic archives. They're living historical documents. They reveal this ongoing interplay between our environment, our evolving technology, and our changing social fabric. Each architectural decision, whether it's the choice of roofing slate, the placement of a specialized room, or the adoption of a hallway for controlled circulation and privacy, it's a cultural artifact. It speaks to the values and needs of the people who conceived, built, and inhabited these spaces across different eras. They are constantly adapting the concept of home to their lives.
So, the next time you walk through your front door, or maybe just look out your window, take a moment, pause and think. What stories do your walls whisper about the way you live, work, and interact with the world around you? Your house is a living, breathing history book, really, just waiting to be read, reflecting centuries of human ingenuity and our shifting desires for comfort, privacy, and connection.
And this raises, I think, an important question as we wrap up. If our homes are constantly evolving records of our lives and societies, what kind of historical narrative are we building into the homes of tomorrow? Are we designing just for fleeting trends, for the fashions of the moment? Or are we designing for profound adaptability? An adaptability that will allow future generations to inscribe their own stories within these living structures, just as previous generations have done for centuries. It's a challenge, isn't it? To think about how our current choices will shape the architectural archives of the future, ensuring they can continue to learn and adapt for centuries to come. Food for thought.